Welcome back to The Secret Sauce with Sean, the show where we delve into the mind of a professional for a masterclass in what they do. Today, we've got another special guest prepared to share their story. As always, remember to like, share, and subscribe. And without further ado, we're going to get into who are you and what do you do?
I'm Zac Bristol, and I'm a barman at a speakeasy-style cocktail bar.
Sweet. Welcome to the show, Zach.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, dude.
I'm honored.
I'm super happy to have you sitting in the chair. So, first thing I kind of want to break into is give me a little bit of the day-to-day, like, what's it like being a barman at a speakeasy? Like, what are the ins and outs, and what do you what's a little slice of life of what you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, the bottom line is service, which is one of the things I'm really, truly passionate about in that industry is service of individuals, which sounds pretty simple, but comes with a lot of complexities the more you get into it.
No, I'm sure. I mean, there's so much depth to it. I think America has definitely reduced service to to make it very transactional. I have asked you to provide X. In return, I will give you money.
Sure.
And there's so much more to service than that.
Yeah.
So I guess, and that kind of does, I think, lead us well into the next question, because I know your story, but these guys don't, of course. What made you want to get into what you're doing now? And can you kind of share, I guess, your story of how you got to where you are?
I sort of fell into it through experience, I would say, through exploration, I think is maybe a better way to put it. Through trial and error, only did I find that service was really the route for me in a lot of ways. And so I started really 20 years ago as a dishwasher from the ground, as the bare bones, the basics of service, hospitality.
Would you suggest that someone who is interested in getting into eventually doing what you do actually start at the bottom? Do you find value in that part of your story?
Yes, I do. Absolutely.
Interesting. I don't think anyone would be like, I want to be a bar manager, so I'm going to be a dishwasher.
Exactly. And I think that that's important for a lot of reasons to start from the bottom. If you're serious about getting into this as a career.
You started as a dishwasher. What came next? You kind of moved from a dishwasher. I imagine at some point you worked with tables.
Yes. Well, and it took a little bit. For example, first I became a cook, and I really thought I wanted to become a cook for a lot of reasons. I kind of thought that that's where I was going, and it took that experience, that adventure, if you will, to really refine where I did want to go. And I found that it wasn't cooking for all sorts of reasons. It's got to be one of the most underpaid, underestimated jobs that you could ever have, in my opinion. Being a cook, being a chef in America, in lots of different countries, is so underappreciated and so undervalued.
Yeah.
And that's one of many reasons why that didn't end up being for me. And all kinds of things came up. For example, computer programming was in there for a little bit. Welding. I learned to weld.
Yeah, your story is crazy. You were all over the map with some things. Yeah. You've done some pretty wild stuff.
So, and that's partially why I say experimentation really is I owe everything to experimentation, adventuring in that way.
Yeah. So you were a dishwasher, then you became a cook, didn't want to become a cook, computer programming, a little bit into welding. What started you, what was the, probably the beginning of getting you to right now, if you were to say this job, this place, pushed me into this, or maybe, I guess, how did you transition from welding into behind the bar?
Yeah. Well, lots of different things. One thing that comes to mind is having a mentor. I had a mentor at this one job, specifically at this one bar I worked at, who, I often say he taught me everything I know, and I really believe that to be true. And that was huge. That was instrumental. One of the biggest things
I love that answer.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest things he taught me is that you can learn anything you want, quite simply, and that the biggest and the only thing holding you back from learning anything you want is yourself. And that's something I really struggled with. I struggled as an uneducated person. For a little bit of backstory, I was homeschooled all my life, and so I don't have a single piece of paper that says I'm educated in any way. You know, and
well, I don't even know how valuable those pieces of paper are because, like we talk about it, you know, there's definitely highly educated people that you look at what they're doing on a daily basis and you're like, that's maybe not the best way to handle that.
Sure, yeah. And when I was growing up, this was a really big point of fear for me. I, as a kid, thought that I might never amount to anything because of this piece of paper that most of my friends had.
Okay.
And they talked about it every day. You know, their diplomas, their GEDs, what they did to achieve these, things. And
so you never went to college. You never
no, I didn't.
had any. I don't think I actually knew that about you. I always figured that you kind of dabbled in it and never did, but you didn't, which is a fantastic part of your story because I personally don't necessarily believe that college is the correct path for everyone.
Yeah.
And I do think that my generation was told over and over and over again, like, you're going to get good grades to go to college, and then you're going to get good grades to get a good job, and then you're going to do well in the job so that you can get married, buy a house, have kids, and that's your life.
Sort of the black and white thinking that college will get you anything you need.
Right.
You know,
and then you find out when you have a degree, that piece of paper that says you know things, it doesn't. People are like, nice piece of paper.
Sure.
What else do you bring to the table?
Exactly. And college, of course, is a tool for certain things, like becoming a doctor. You need college for that.
Yes.
You know? And that's just a given. We don't have to talk about that.
Right.
But there are all kinds of lifestyles, beautiful and amazing lifestyles, beautiful ways, that humans can live a wonderful life without college. All kinds of careers, all kinds of,
No, that totally makes sense to me. So you had this mentor. He taught you. You said that you were working at a bar when you met this mentor?
Yeah. So going back to this mentor, he really instilled in me that you can learn anything you want. And from there is when I decided to start experimenting into computer programming and welding, and really found that experience is an art form. The experience is showing up and really envisioning what you want and showing up to do it. For example, my welding class was this guy who was a welder, and he had a lot of jobs, and he was in over his head, and he just needed someone to show up.
Yeah.
And before I got into welding, I was like, no, I can't. You got to get certified. You got to go to a special set of colleges. And I really found that all I had to do was show up at this guy's house, who really needed me to show up at the end of the day. And there are all kinds of people like this in all kinds of fields. I mean, you can talk about baker, pottery.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're interested in someone, find someone who needs someone to show up and do it.
Dude, I want to kind of land on that a little bit, because that is something that I've thought about and found to be true in my story as well, is that if you're interested in something, it's exactly like you said, someone somewhere has a need, right?
Yeah.
Like someone somewhere is thinking, oh man, I could really use like this person in this moment.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing about that is, like, if you can find that person, the resume doesn't matter.
Exactly right.
So what took you from welding to now full-time bar? What's the transition of that look like?
Yeah, well, and that's sort of the interesting part, is it never really was like it wasn't very direct like that. Like it wasn't dishwashing too, like it was sort of all at the same time. For example, I had serving jobs and I had a host job, and then I would also show up to weld, so the restaurants were always in the background.
Okay, this is making sense now. So there was almost this meshing of like you were welding on the side, you're working at a restaurant. So you were consistent. I didn't realize this. So you were consistently in restaurants. And then the welding happened on the side, the computer programming happened on the side.
Exactly.
And then, okay, this is making sense then. And so at some point, you stepped into where you're at now. What made you, really want to step into this specific space, like this job? Because I think this is something that I hammer home all the time is like you always have a choice, right? Like even where you're working today, a lot of people will say like, "Oh man, like I don't like my job. I don't like what I do." And I'm like, "Well, you could quit today. You don't have to work there." Like, "Oh, well, I got to pay my bills." It's like, yeah, but all of us know that when a position or an environment or a culture or a boss or a coworker or something gets bad enough, you can take the steps to get a new job. And I think a lot of people forget that sometimes, and they forget that it's an option and it's a choice, right? Like they always, at least the advice I always got was don't leave a job for no job. So don't just quit on the spot. Always have something lined up.
Sure.
My dad would always say, make sure you've signed something saying that you have a new job before you quit your old one, which I think is great advice to live by because it ensures that you're not going to miss a rent payment.
When you have rent on the line, and exactly right.
It makes total sense. So this is starting to make a lot more sense now. So you finally got to this place. What made you choose this over other stuff?
Yeah, well, lots of different things. You mentioned different jobs. And one thing that's interesting about the service industry is it takes a lot of patience, dedication, vision to stay at one service industry job for a long time. Unless
I think it takes wherewithal.
Yeah, absolutely it does.
Dude, when you serve people, because you get a number of people who are just, any customer-facing position, you're going to get a number of people who are just very unpleasant to interact with.
Yeah, totally. I worked at a bottomless mimosa bar for a couple years, and that comes to mind a lot because only soldiers can do that day in, day out. I'm quite serious that, like, in order to do that every single day, and wake up with a smile on your face and say, I'm going to go serve bottomless mimosas again today for some of the drunkest, most incoherent people you've ever encountered in your life every day.
Are they like repeat offenders too? Is it like the same people coming in, just plastered day to day?
One guy broke his neck because I served him. He ordered too many mimosas and he broke his neck on a scooter. This is in Denver. And
not in the restaurant after he left.
No,
right?
after he left. He left. He left and got on a motorized scooter and got in a car accident and broke his neck.
And you guys probably had no idea because
I knew because he came in 1 week later and ordered bottomless mimosas.
Wait, okay, at least he's consistent.
Well, that just goes to show.
How does that work with you? Like, did the police have any issues with you guys for over-serving him? Or is it just like...
No, it's very ingrained into our society right now. Drinking and accidents that happen. Not in recent history do you go look for the bartender that served the person that made the dumb decision. Do you know what I mean? Like, which, is good.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
So you built up. I do love this part of your story. You did build up a like a set of skills, a temperance, and almost refining in this bottomless mimosa bar in Denver. And I know you've told me some crazy stories. I didn't know about this story. That's so out there.
Well, and that's the thing is like that's just the tip of the iceberg, because it's a daily thing. And so like you really have to have a vision to be able to get through that every day. You really have to have a light at the end of the tunnel in order to not feel like you are nobody or you're not making a difference, for example. Because that's where hospitality comes in, is really like connecting and good service and talking with people and
you really love the actual serving part of the serving industry. I don't think I know many people that work in service that do it to serve.
Yeah.
Like, I think most people view it as a 9 to 5 paycheck. Like they are like, I'm here because I have to be. But you actually enjoy, and you're doing this for the study of the art of like, how can I make someone's experience the absolute best it can be?
I call it server science. And I'm not the only one who's called it that, but it's definitely underappreciated and under recognized. But I've put a lot of thought and passion into my server science, and there are results. It's a big difference. Like, for example, at the place I work now, I'm lucky to have a really good position there, and I'm really respected, I guess, for lack of better words, for just my experience that I bring to the table. But I'm told multiple times every day that I'm the best server that someone has ever had. And at first it used to surprise me, but it doesn't anymore because, like you said, nobody cares about it. Nobody cares about server science.
Yeah.
And
no, for sure.
So it's surprising, I think, for a lot of people.
It is. It's jarring now. I think this is a big part of the story as well, is like COVID messed up a lot of the societal norms that we knew. And I think this is like a little bit of that as well. Is like service was on the decline before COVID quite clearly. Like, I think this would have been an inevitability anyways, but I do think that like the hard stop on everyone working and then returning to work really just like cannonball.
It's a big deal.
Yeah,
it's
a like
huge deal. Yes. And yeah, don't get me started on that, because working in the service industry during COVID felt like kind of being on the front lines in some ways, just because of how dicey it was. I mean, just there's no way around how messy it was for every single restaurant and every single guest. As you know,
I mean, the whole thing was just foobar. Like, it was just so.
It was rough in every way, and you're right that it changed everything for a long time. I think. I think we still see certain reactions to like how COVID has affected service. Okay. In all kinds of ways.
No, that's true. I definitely get that. And I'm not surprised that you get that comment of like, you're the best server I've ever had. It's difficult for the audience to understand this, but as someone who's like been on the receiving end of like what you provide to clients, customers, whatever, like however you want to term it, it's a totally different experience, guys. Like, if you haven't had really good service before, it's in a way, it's like life-changing. It's impactful because it makes you realize what things were supposed to be. I actually love the comparison of flying on an airplane. I don't know if like you've thought about this or know about this, but like flying on an airplane used to be a really big deal. Like, people used to dress up for it. And that's why flight attendants still dress that way, is because they view it as like they have tried to stay at least consistent with what the culture started as, which is like people used to get dressed up. It used to be a very polite experience. Like, and that's of course because at one point it was meant for only people who could afford it. So there was a certain amount of like accessibility that limited that.
Sure. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but like, there was a cordiality to it. And I think that going to restaurants used to be similar in the same way. Like, when we used to go out for dinner, you wouldn't show up in your PJs. And like most restaurants now have like no dress code. You can just come as you are, which in a way there's something beautiful about that. Like, that's very convenient for the customer. It allows everyone in, but at the same point you lose a little bit of that like, kind of like the ambiance in a way. Like, when you go to a really nice restaurant, I actually appreciate the dress codes. I think, and I'd love for people to put their ideas in the comments below of like, I enjoy when I know that I'm going to go to a nice restaurant and I take my wife and she gets like gussied up, because it feels special. You feel like you feel more important than you might be. But it's rewarding, you know?
Absolutely. Well, there are big differences there. You know, you mentioned, restaurants and how they're viewed, and how that changes over time. And that's a really fascinating thing to observe, even like culturally, and like how how different restaurant experiences are in different countries, but they all have underlying foundations, I believe, of connection, human connection, communication, camaraderie, nourishment, and there's some magic to that. There's some magic to the difference between a fast food nation, or even just like, fast food one night because you have to have it, and sitting down with someone you love and taking the time in the space, and taking the time to dress up like you said, or there's big differences there.
With your server science, like if you're home with your significant other, that I'm not going to dox and put on the internet, like if you're home with your significant other, do you keep applying this server science? Like if you were to make a dinner at home, do you ever just treat it the exact same way as you do in the restaurant?
Well, no, not really. Honestly, I would say yes and no. One thing I would say about being passionate about the service industry is it does teach you just kindness, patience, understanding, empathy. It can teach you those things on a totally different level, which does bleed into your relationships.
Okay, that's fair. But you wouldn't. It's not. There still is like a separation, which is natural. I think everyone has that for their job.
For sure. I would say that there is definitely an on and off switch in some ways, because when I'm out on the server floor, I am a certain way, and that's when the curtain is open,
right?
And
the performance has begun.
And when the curtain is closed, I'm eating food in 5 seconds over a trash can, and I look like a pig. I look like a filthy animal, and I think it's healthy to have yourself in. Yeah,
you got to have that dichotomy. You got to have a little bit of
Absolutely.
Otherwise you will go insane.
I think so.
Yeah, I completely understand that. Well, let's kind of get into what the secret sauce. Let's kind of get the behind the scenes, since we just kind of magically arrived there. I want to continue down that.
Yeah.
So, can you think of any bad advice that you got in terms of maybe this was a piece that someone told you and you were like, I followed that, and if I had never gotten that, I would have gotten further faster, or I would have developed better if I had just not had that piece of information?
Yeah. A couple of things. One of the biggest ones goes back to the school thing. I mean, I can't emphasize enough how much I was told, and it was ingrained, that you don't amount to anything if you don't have education.
Yeah.
And I think that just needs to be so much more dynamic than it is, and I think that was one of the worst pieces of advice, because it really stifled me. The mentality that I developed from thinking that I wasn't going to amount to anything was in danger of me not amounting to anything because of that fear that was holding me back from exploring anything, from showing up to a welding or going to pottery class or guitar lessons, or, I think that was one of the most dangerous ones. Another one is that the service industry is a dead-end job. I think that's
a really dark, interesting statement. Can you kind of expand on that?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a huge one, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons server science isn't really looked at or often underappreciated. So,
I just want to kind of expand that definition for people. When you say a dead end job, I'm guessing, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong here, that you're kind of referring to that the service industry is meant for high schoolers or people who are retired and minimum wage workers, and it's not to be viewed as something like an art necessarily or a long-term position.
Exactly right. There's sort of a perspective, and it's very prevalent. It's really common that restaurants are sort of burger flippers, and you do that in order to get through college or to get to something else.
Yeah.
But service industry is almost never a nice career path to say at the dinner table, even. You know what I mean?
It's not something some people would say is not something to write home about, or you know, it's not something that you would proudly tell your grandma.
Totally. Totally. And most commonly, somebody will ask you what you do, and I'll say, "Oh, I'm a bartender." And they'll say, "Well, what do you want to do? Like, did you go to school to be, something?"
That's so insulting. Like, "Oh, I'm a bartender."
Yeah.
Well, what did you want to do? As if like you couldn't have wanted to do this.
For a long time, I did take it personally. It was really insulting, but you can't blame them because it is a really prevalent perspective, and I think, and it is related, I think, to education.
Yep. It goes back to you have to go to school to be a doctor. Exactly. You have to go to school to be a lawyer.
Exactly.
And I think what's interesting too is the idea that you, in your current position, it's like, okay, it's a dead end job. Like the amount of money you can make is capped. It's like, well, really it's not, because it's exactly like you were talking about. It's a progression. You started as a dishwasher. I imagine at some point you were serving tables, and then you're behind the bar. Now you're a manager, right?
Yeah.
And pay has gone up with that, but what bothers me is that if you reduce jobs down to how much you get paid, yes, the only reason we have jobs is because we need money. We wouldn't work if money was not an integral part of our society.
Indeed.
And at the same point, though, having a job and an ideal job is so much more than monetary gain. Like, in fact, I would say that the people who are working their jobs because of the dollar sign aren't happy. You cannot be happy if you're only working for money. I said this in the previous episode. I'll say it again. Like, you have to enjoy and desire what you do for an occupation, because if you don't, it will rip you to pieces. And there has to be a purpose. I think one thing that I love about what I've heard so far is like this server science for you is your purpose. Like you're like, I'm going to develop this art. And I think a lot of people view like bar management as a dead end job because there's no purpose in their eyes beyond like managing the bar or doing it because you have to. And it's like, that's not the case. That's not the story. Like there's there can be so much more to it than that.
Absolutely. And I would go even further to say that developing that as a skill will apply to every aspect of life.
Yes.
Every single aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, from your health to your relationships to you name it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, for sure. That makes a lot of sense to me. So on the other side of it, you had this mentor you were talking to. I think this question will be much more up your alley. Like, what's one of the best pieces of advice? Like, if you could choose one thing that you got that really just made like an absolute huge difference. Maybe this was an epiphany you had or a pivotal moment. It doesn't necessarily have to be from someone. But what was one thing that you learned along the way that like, if you had learned this piece of advice sooner, would have just accelerated your career and your life?
Yeah. He said that sometimes in order to know where you're going, you have to strike out.
Ooh.
And what he meant was that sometimes in order to know where you're going, you have to fail.
I think that's so valuable.
Yeah. And he really changed my life with that one because we worked together at a bar for going on like 5 years. We had worked together, and that's a long time to be at a service, like I mentioned
100%.
before.
Most people cap out at max at like 2 years.
Totally.
And I don't think even many people last that long.
Totally. And I was getting into a bad way because I had been there for a little too long. I was getting too comfortable. I was not passionate about my server science.
Where was this?
This was at a bar in town, Gillette's.
Oh, I didn't know you worked there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yeah,
that's so funny.
Yeah.
Did you know that's where I met my wife?
I did know that. Yeah. You've mentioned that before.
Yeah, that's just so funny.
That's so fun.
Do you care if we say where you currently work?
No.
Okay. So like being at Social is...
I'm proud of that, being at Social.
Okay, so you met him at Gillette's, and then... So that's where you're getting this mentorship. This is adding up. Like this, the story is making sense. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Gillette's is similar to the Social, which is where he's currently at. It's another speakeasy bar and in town. Actually, probably the only other one.
Yeah, but coming close. Yeah. There are lots of cocktail bars that come close.
So I love that piece of advice though. So you have to strike out, like you have to fail to know where you want to go in a way.
Yeah.
Like that's so good because I think that is true for I think that's a piece of success in a successful person is failure. And I think until you accept that you're going to fail, you can't succeed. Because like if you're locked into I can't, like I'm not going to fail, I can't accept failure. It's like, well, failure is an inevitability.
Yeah.
Like we all even fail at life at some point. Eventually we're all going to die. Like, so you're going to fail once and you're going to fail when you stop living. So
totally.
like your failure is inevitable in a way. So, but once you accept it, you can start to really, I think, thrive too. Because failure also ties into feedback.
Exactly right. When you start to appreciate failure, you realize how much it can help you refine what your vision, if that makes sense,
100%.
And there are lots of sayings about Albert Einstein and all that, but I think of that. It's said that he loved failure for that reason, that if he failed hundreds of times, he was doing well because he knew he was getting closer to what he wanted to achieve. And I think that's really important because I think that that's one of the biggest reasons I personally held myself back, was not feeling like I was good enough or educated enough, that I was destined to fail. And the truth was I was destined to fail, but that's what I needed. I needed to go and weld and fail a lot. I needed to make mistakes while welding so that I could see how to get better. And I did. And sure enough, I got a lot better at welding. And then I showed up for...
The fact that you can weld as a bartender is like such a...
Well, and it's just because I showed up, like I said, and I failed, and that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And then I went to a welding job, like an official Craigslist welding job. And I showed up with my welder, and he said, "Where did you get certified?" And I said, "YouTube." And that was like a pivotal moment for me, because this is where all my, this is the chance to prove myself without any piece of paper that says any education. And he said, "Okay, prove it." And I did. I proved it.
Oh, dude, I'm so happy. I was really hoping you weren't going to come back with
No. He said, "Prove it." And I did. And that was the end of it. He didn't care where the fuck Jack Hollingsworth School of Welding. Like, he didn't if I could do it, he wanted that. He wanted the result.
Let's go. And that's it. That's all anyone wants.
That applies to so much in life. That applies to so much.
When an employer wants you for a job, they don't care where you've been. They don't care what piece of paper you have. They are, can you do the job?
Yeah.
And can you do it better than everybody else who's telling that person, I can do this job? Because that's all it is, right? When you have a bunch of applicants who say like, and do you deal with hiring and firing at Social?
Not at Social, no.
Okay. But in the past you have.
In the past.
Yeah. When you have a bunch of applicants that come to you, it's everyone saying like, when you submit a resume, all you're telling this person is, I can do your job. Okay. That's great. Like, you can do my job.
Yeah.
But everyone's saying that. So it's like, so where's the proof? I'm so glad that he gave you the opportunity to just weld in front of him and do it and say like, I don't need a piece of paper, because really when it comes down to it, that's all that employers care about. Can you do the job? And can you do it better than anyone else? And who's going to do it the best for the cheapest price? Because they're effectively shopping for the best employee.
Yeah.
What was something that you thought, oh yeah, that, like, I got this, no problem.
Yeah.
And it was just exceptionally more challenging, or something that you weren't aware that you were going to have to learn?
I think it's that you never get good at bartending.
Ooh.
And that's because of how dynamic it is. Because of how dynamic people are. Because of how different bars are. Because of how dynamic drinks are. Drinks are
when you
so
say
fashionable.
Dynamic, are you saying different or just vast?
So
maybe?
Interchangeable. Like, for example,
okay,
the moment, and I remember this blowing my mind constantly as a kid, is I would have a night where I was like, that was an awesome night of bartending. I just felt like I connected with every guest. I made every drink within,
a certain time frame.
Yeah, exactly. And you think like, okay, I'm getting there. I'm good at it. And just when you start to think that is when the next day shows up, and you've never seen these people in your life, and you've never been treated this way in your life, and you've never felt this way, and you got to power through it, and it's and you just never get good at it, and
whiplash in a way.
You have to get good at. I think that the best bartenders are prepared for the unexpected at all times. And I think that they know that they're only as good as their experience, and that experiences are on the way. You know what I mean? You know, and just when, like, Ace was a great example. I worked there for a number of years, and man, I thought I was hot shit, because I had worked at this basement cocktail bar for a couple of years. I had it under my belt, so I could put that on my resume. I'd served thousands of people at that point. I thought I was hot.
So was Ace Gillette's before Denver or after? Just for
before.
Okay. So this is making sense. So
then I got a job at a different bar, and I walked in hot shit. Like, I worked at Ace Gillette's. We were serving martinis all day, blah, blah, blah. This bar was totally different. I didn't know shit at this bar. I had to relearn every single thing, like from the glassware to the booze they had to who was coming in and what they were ordering, how they wanted it, in what time frame, how they were talking to me, and it was totally different. It was a totally different job.
Yeah,
I didn't know shit, and then go from there to this bottomless mimosa place all over again.
Yeah,
and then, but even social. One of the reasons I love it is because it's very dynamic with guests. All kinds of people come there, from tourists to college kids to old people who want the old classic cocktails that they remember, we just get all walks of life. And you just have to be prepared for all walks of life. And it gets interesting quick, because server science has to include everybody.
Yeah.
And so the way that I serve grandma in her dirty martini drinking brunch group is totally different than the way I'm serving college kids. And that's within 100%. A matter of seconds. Within a matter of seconds, I'm changing my whole service style. And you never are all the way good at it. Like, it takes a lot of practice, but I think that one of the foundations of my philosophies in server science is that you are never good at it. And if you always set the bar too high, you can be prepared for the unexpected.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense to me. I guess my next question is, so you've been developing this server science for how many years now?
Well, since I was a punk-ass little kid, pardon my French, 20 years.
Okay. So what would you say is, out of your story up to now, what would you say was the most challenging lesson for you to learn? And this could be like physically difficult, emotionally difficult, but just for you, like, what was the most challenging part of your journey into bar management?
I think it really is the failure. It goes back to just the failure and the striking out, like I mentioned. There's so much fear in that. There's so much uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty and unreliability in the service industry already. Preparing yourself to really get into to pursue that as your career is just really unsettling, because there's not many people there to encourage you into what that could be like, and I'm really lucky. Well, I say I'm really lucky, but 20 years has taken me a long way, and to a point where I do feel really confident in that my job can take me to lots of different financially stable places. But for about 20 years, I didn't feel that way.
Yeah.
I did not feel secure.
So this is recent for you.
Yeah, I would say so.
Sweet. I'm happy that you've achieved that, though.
I appreciate it. And that's partially just my own perspective, how I do set the bar really high, and I'm not often patting myself on the back along the way.
I think that is what makes compliments so special, though, right? When someone gives you a compliment in an area that you feel like you've been struggling, that feeling to me is life-changing.
Yeah, you're right. And the truth is that it is life-changing often. That type of mentorship or communication or guidance, if you
Feedback
will.
even,
Yeah.
The last question I have, and I love this question. Knowing what you know now, if you were going to build a roadmap of like how to get to your current position, what would you say are the musts? Like, you know, I would start here and have this job. I'd do it for X amount of time, or I'd do it until I learned X. Like, if you could build a roadmap for yourself, knowing everything that you know now, even if you were to go back in time and talk to yourself and say, like, hey, I'm going to take you someplace awesome, but these are the necessary things you got to do. Don't do these things. How would you build that roadmap?
I would say touch grass with confidence. And I mean that you should do and try everything with confidence. You should try guitar, and you should try piano, and you should try dancing, and you should try cooking, and you should try accounting, and
So to be a
driving.
good bar manager, to get where you are, the best thing you can do is be well-rounded.
Well, I think that not just to be a good bar manager, to find yourself, I guess, is what I'm referring to. In order to feel confident in yourself and where you're going and who you are, try everything. And only through that refinement, that exploring, failure, success, repetition, only through exploration have I achieved confidence in myself. Because of the welding, this is the music, the art, the travel. The travel's a big one. And that's what I mean when I say touch grass. I mean, get out there and do it with confidence, and be confident that you will fail. Be confident that you will fail thousands of times, and be confident that that is what you need.
So to get where, if you were going to do it all over again, that would probably be the big piece for you, is just fail and don't be afraid to fail.
And don't let it hold you back, because I think,
and just use it to drive you forward.
Exactly.
No matter what position you're going to hold, no matter what job you're going to have, just be confident in failure and drive forward.
Yeah, and the reason why failure is such a big one, why that comes up in almost every question, is because of how stifling it is, like with the wrong perspective, and how stifling it was for me. How many things I didn't try because I did fail once and thought, well, I'm a failure at that too. And the answer is, of course you are. If you don't know what you're doing yet, you have to fail.
I think that's such a valuable lesson to even end with, is just like, if you're trying something new, don't expect to be great at it. Like, this episode is episode 3 of this podcast. If you guys have stayed along for the ride and you're at this moment in the podcast, first of all, kudos to you for putting up with us. And second of all, like, if you're going to try something new in any regard, whether it's at the job you're currently at or at a new job, or you're going to seek a new position, you want to become a bar manager, you want to become a realtor, you want to start your own podcast, like, it's very likely, I would actually say that it's more likely, or it's the most likely outcome, that whatever you try that's new is going to be, you're going to fail. But that should not discourage you. In fact, that should almost encourage you. It's
should be exciting.
Okay,
it should be exciting, I think.
Yeah.
Because you're that much closer to knowledge.
Yeah.
In fact, failure is knowledge in ways. Like
No, I mean, it makes total sense. I mean, you fail and you say, like, all right, I've learned that. We're not going to do exactly that again. We're going to try again. Well, Zach, thank you for being here.
I'm honored. I'm honored to be here.
No, it's an honor to have you. I guess the truly last question is, what's next on the horizon, and where can people find you, and how can they support you?
Yeah. Well, you can find me pouring alcohol at your local bar, depending on the time and place. I think that my server science will take me into some human resource work of some kind. I don't know what kind, whether it's
interesting,
whether it'll be some kind of therapy, or maybe it'll be writing about my perspective. It could be lots of things right now. And I think one of my biggest setbacks now as such an experiment and adventurer is narrowing down which ones I'm going to pursue. And that's kind of where I'm at right now on that topic.
Creative minds never struggle with that. That's not, normal for creative people to struggle with reining things in.
Yeah, so I guess I would say stay tuned. Thanks for listening.
No, for sure. Zach, this is awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching today's episode of The Secret Sauce with Sean. If you like today's episode, holler at a homie and head over to my channel for episodes just like this one. If you have any questions, comments, or hate, drop them in the section below and hit me up for your shot in the hot seat.